Hello and welcome to the NBA Outlet presented by OTGBasketball.com. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Kory Waldron, and two special guests today, Dennis Dow and Preston Ellis, hosts of Do You Believe in Magic? What's up, guys?
What's up?
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
We got a party today. I like it. Orlando bringing in the heat.
Bringing in some magic. Before we get started, just a quick reminder, you can check out the show on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, Dash Radio, and Google Play. But before we talk about this upcoming season, we're going to look back at last year. Magic 25-57. Offense was an issue, lack of talented point guards. But what were your thoughts on Orlando last year?
All right, I'll go first. This is Preston. And first of all, Nick, I don't think we need to live in the past, okay? Just first of all, I don't know if you had to watch that team last year, but it's not something we want to talk about anymore. But we do have high hopes for this team. The team was crippled by injuries last year, both inflicted by circumstance and kind of by choice near the end of the season. Terrence Ross probably could have gone near the end of February, if not early March. But they're bringing back their starting five. We're expecting big things from Aaron Gordon, Evan Fournier, and like you mentioned, the point guard is a bit of a question mark with DJ Augustine, Jerian Grant behind him, and then Isaiah Briscoe behind him. I had a chance to see Briscoe in Summer League. He still needs a lot of development, but he's very confident attacking the basket. But we don't expect more than like 10 minutes a game from him. And then you've got Jonathan Isaac, Mo Bamba. I know that we're focusing on the point guard position at this point in time, but there's a lot to be excited about in Orlando right now. There's a lot of eyes that are going to be on Jonathan Isaac and Mo Bamba in addition to Aaron Gordon. They got him, in my opinion, on a great deal. 4 years, $76 million. Last year he averaged 18 and 8, wasn't fully healthy, broke out for 40 points multiple times, and we're expecting him to take a jump this season. But how do they all fit together? What are the Magic going to do with some of their veterans like Evan Fournier, Nikola Vucevic, Terrence Ross is an expiring contract. So the East is wide open. That 8th spot right now in the Eastern Conference playoff race, nobody expects the Magic to be involved in that race at this point in time, but they do have a lot of horses. And if some of these young guns can put it together, you can definitely make an argument that Steve Clifford with the Hornets in his first season led that team to the playoffs. Could he do it with the Magic this year? Probably not, but there's a lot to be excited about all the same.
Dennis, what were your thoughts on last year's Orlando Magic team? Just a brief little overview.
I think it was one of those where I think they had a great start. If I think looking it up, they were 8-4. They had a couple of blowouts over the Cavs and the Spurs, and they were just killing it from three. I remember that as a team, I think they were shooting over 50%. And I've always been a big fan of Fournier and some, Gordon. I think is a good player, but it was just something where I don't know if it just doesn't seem like the Magic have had a plan going forward. And I think last year it was Jeff Weltman's first year. And so I think it was just laying some groundwork last year for the direction that they want to go. So like Preston said, I do think it's a more exciting season, if you will, than last season was. So I think last season they started out a little fluky and, going 8-4, and then the rest of the season they were pretty much awful. So I'm sure they're glad for a new season. They've got a new coach, and this is Weltman's second season. So I think moving forward, I think last season's just going to be I think they're moving in a better direction than they were, say, 5 years ago.
Yeah, last season for sure they started off really hot. I think on a lot of podcasts, especially on the Outlet, we talked about how they were up in the top of the Eastern Conference. That was that first month or so. Then they came back to earth, like you guys both mentioned. When you look at the players, that's like the bright spot of this team is guys like Aaron Gordon. Obviously, they had to retain him after how Oladipo and Tobias Harris developed. You couldn't afford to lose another guy who could possibly pop off at any point in the next 1 to 3 years. So Aaron Gordon, keeping him, you had to do that. If Jonathan Isaac is healthy, I love his his ceiling on the defensive side of the ball. I love his length. He's very athletic. He can play, the power forward, the small forward. So I really like him. As Preston mentioned, the point guard situation, DJ Augustine is like the number one guy. Jerian Grant's the follow-up. They lost their assist leader in Shelvin Mack with 3.4 assists per game. which I'll never let that go. Seeing Orlando Magic Twitter tweet the assist leader with that number to me was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. But yeah, I mean, this is still a very young team. I think Frank Vogel should have been kept around for one more year. I'm still a little upset that they fired him when he really had no chance to be successful over there. But they got some nice pieces. And as Preston mentioned, the East is wide open. So who knows? A couple of these guys develop and hit, their ceiling or near their ceiling. Steve Clifford is a defensive-minded coach. So who knows? And the 8-speed is definitely not out of the realm of possibilities.
Yeah, you guys pretty much nailed it all. What would you say was the highlight of last season before we go a little bit forward? What was the biggest, thing to be happy about last year, Preston?
I think it's like we talked about that initial start, that 8-4. It still gives you a lot of promise as a Magic fan. You've seen what this starting five can do together when fully healthy, when fully engaged. Was it a fluke? Of course, but can they do something similar to it when all healthy, when all on the floor? We're going to get a chance to see it this year. Augustin is a better shooter than Elfrid Payton, so can the Magic come out shooting as they did last year with Fournier and Terrence Ross, just spreading the floor for Aaron Gordon, who's becoming a more confident three-point shooter? Nikola Vucevic is a willing and adept passer if he's operating out of the paint, kind of in a DeMarcus Cousins-esque role with four shooters all around him. That's something that Steve Clifford talks about, the 4-and-1, something that he developed with Dwight Howard famously 10 years ago under Stan Van Gundy. Then there is the opportunity for the Magic to, again, light up the scoreboard from three-point range. But with that being said, probably the highlight of the season due to all the injuries was probably the scoring prowess of Aaron Gordon. He had a couple of games in the new year against the Miami Heat, and I'm forgetting the other one, where he just exploded and seemed to be unstoppable at times. They also had a big come-from-behind victory over the Cleveland Cavaliers sometime in mid-January. That was another high point. Definitely the lowest point of the Magic season was that infamous win over the Washington Wizards on the final day of the regular season that caused them to fall from what could have been the third spot in the draft and possibly a chance at Luka Doncic all the way to number 6. But some of the guys will rebuff that and say, well, there was a lot of moving pieces between 3, 4, 5, and 6, and depending on how things, and anything could have happened. But if you look at that game and you see that win, that 25th win, really didn't do the Magic any favors.
Yeah, in terms of the highlight of last season, I would just say it was the start as well. And I think in particular, I can remember, looking at the score of the Magic in the Spurs game, and I think the Magic beat them by, gosh, I forget the exact total, 37 or something crazy like that. And I just remember being so shocked that happened, because usually, the Spurs really wear out some of those teams at the bottom of the league. I would say that was the highlight. Also, as I mentioned, I like Evan Fournier. So Fournier and Gordon, to me, just, I think we forget how young they are. Fournier's he's only 25 years old. I mean, it feels like he's been in the league forever. But I think moving forward, I think they have a couple of pieces. And as well, I think they've been able to set themselves up decently in terms of their payroll with some of the moves that they've made. So I think that to me would be the highlight of last season.
Yeah, I think the highlight would be the comeback for me, the comeback behind win over the Cavs. Because I think Isaiah Thomas was still on the team at that time too, right? That was like one of the final stamps that team just wasn't going to work. But yeah, I mean, like you guys both mentioned, I think Aaron Gordon to a degree, you could probably mention almost his entire season as a highlight, despite being hurt. I actually didn't know he was hurt. What was he hurt with, Preston?
A variety of injuries from his shoulder to his ankle. He had some knee troubles, but a lot of that, it was cautionary, kind of similar to the Terrence Ross situation, where some of these guys could have come back a bit sooner. Jonathan Isaac, when he rolled his ankle for the second time, he was shut down for the remainder of the season, only played 25 games, could have played a lot more than that. I think pretty early in the season, right around that New Year deadline, the Magic pretty much punted. And I think they could have at least gotten to 30 wins. 35 is probably stretching it a bit, but a lot of these guys were being held not due to any kind of severity, but simply due to caution.
Okay, that makes sense. Yes, the highlight for me would just be that Cavs blow up.
For me, I think it's just Aaron Gordon, the jump he made, and now he kind of solidifies himself as a building block for the Orlando Magic. Preston already kind of touched on his disappointment. What would be the disappointment of last season for you, Dennis and Kory?
Sorry, I skipped over that one. I think just the disappointment. I think after they had that 8-4 start, I think they immediately had a 9-game losing streak. Because at the beginning of the season, there's always that team, and I think all of us, we start looking for kind of little angles about, are we sleeping on the Magic? How are they doing this? And then they immediately crashed back to earth after that start that they had. Disappointment wise, though, I don't think they can be too disappointed. I think they, going into last season, I don't think they had expectations that they would be a playoff team. However, I think the disappointment would be that, as Preston alluded to, they got to a certain point where they just decided, like we just need to tank. We need to do that. And I think Frank Vogel being let go as well, maybe a disappointment. I'm not sure if he was the right guy for that job. And I like Steve Clifford. So I would say that would be some of the disappointments.
I just want to jump in and mention Aaron Gordon also missed games due to a sore hip, a sore calf, and a concussion.
So everything.
And a strained left hip flexor. Let's not forget that.
Ooh, the hip flexor.
Yeah.
Hey, that's serious.
For me, disappointment-wise, I mean, my big point was Frank Vogel. I don't know. Obviously, I watched Frank Vogel for 6 years in Indiana, so I know the potential of him as a coach. And I just don't think he ever got the roster to really have a fair shot, which is it goes for a ton of NBA coaches out there. I feel a lot of guys get fired with having an improper or a not a fully developed team underneath them. And then also, I think disappointment-wise, possibly because, as you mentioned, Preston, this team did decide to tank. Not moving, maybe Evan Fournier or moving, I can't say his last name, Nikolai Vucevic. Someone say it for me.
Vucevic.
For not trading Vucevic. I think if you're tanking one of those guys, I think should have been dealt. Obviously, I think Vucevic, he broke his hand, right, at some point last year, so he missed a lot of time. But I think if you're going to tank, you should have traded one of those guys away personally.
Yeah, I think gathering assets is always something you want to do if you're going to have a tanking season. But I think the injuries obviously are disappointing, even though some of them were more so precautionary, holding guys out. Just missing time. I think I want to see Isaac play more, and it kind of stunk that he didn't get to play as much because being banged up. But moving on from last season, talking about the ranking this year, all votes coming from the OTG staff. The Magic came in at number 28. Number 30 was the Atlanta Hawks. Number 29, the Sacramento Kings. What are your thoughts on this ranking? Is it fair, too high, too low? Preston, go at it.
I think it's going to be too low. I think the Magic are capable of doing more when fully engaged. They've also got a new coach, and according to Tim Krangis, one of the new writers that I'm going to be working for at B-Ball Insider, Steve Clifford employed more actions with the Charlotte Hornets successfully than any other team in the NBA. And what I just mean by that is the Charlotte Hornets play fundamental, disciplined basketball. What did the Orlando Magic do last year? Anything but that. These guys constantly lamented not trusting each other. Frank Vogel consistently talked about how the guys were not one-on-one players, and yet in late-game situations, these guys were trying to take people off the dribble. That's not something that's going to be acceptable with Steve Clifford. And if they can remain healthy, you've got the same starting five from last year, except they're actually going to play in 50 or more games. In addition to that, you've got a loaded bench in newcomers like Jonathan Isaac and Mo Bamba, who I think at this point in time are going to at least start the season off the bench. These guys are going to come in the second unit and hopefully just wreck people as they continue their development in the NBA. So I think it's definitely too low. Plus, you have to take into account the Eastern Conference. Right now, there's really nobody that scares you in the Eastern Conference beyond the top 7. Right now, for that 8th position, you've probably got some version of the Charlotte Hornets and maybe the Detroit Pistons, maybe the New York Knicks fighting for that spot. None of those guys give you any cause for alarm. So the Magic definitely have the opportunity if they're fully engaged, if they play for it. But like you guys were just saying, if they get any kind of feasible offer that makes sense for Evan Fournier, Nikola Vucevic, Terrence Ross, those guys are going to be out of town. DJ Augustine, any of those guys, because like you said, they're not anticipating that any of those guys are going to be in their long-term plans. Of course, eventually they want to move move Mo Bamba into the starting lineup, Jonathan Isaac into the starting lineup, and you only have so much room once you pay all of those guys to pay other guys. So, but with that being said, these guys are veterans. They're in a new system. They're motivated. They've got hungry, motivated guys behind them. Kem Birch is another meaningful role player. Melvin Frazier and Wesley Wundu, they're disasters offensively, but defensively, they're dogs, man. They shut people down. They put a brick wall at that perimeter, and nobody can break through. So there's a lot of players to be excited about with the Magic. And we're just very hopeful that Steve Clifford, like Marvin Williams said in a quote whenever Steve Clifford got the job, he said, these guys are going to love playing for Steve Clifford. They're not going to make mistakes. They're going to play together as a unit. And that's all we've been wanting as Magic fans.
Yeah, I would say the excuse me, I would say the rating is fair, just because I think that while I do believe there is a chance for the Magic to move up drastically in terms of their positioning in the East. I just don't see a lot of separation between the Magic and, say, some of those teams like the Knicks, Brooklyn, Chicago. I just don't see a big difference. So while I could see the Magic finishing at the top of those teams, you can also see them finishing, under some of those teams. So I would say the rating is fair. While 28 could be a little low by the time the season's over, I think they could be anywhere in that 24, 25 to 28 range. So I would say the rating is fair based on that there is a chance that, they could overtake the Knicks because, they're going to be missing Porzingis. They could overtake the Nets. They could overtake Charlotte potentially. But I think there are some teams, though, that are as good or better than them that are down there. Like, I have a hard time seeing that the Magic could be better than Detroit or better than Charlotte, for that matter. So it'll be interesting to see how they do. I think potential-wise, if things break well for them this season, like Preston said, injuries hurt them so bad last season. If they can get healthy and not get hit so hard by the injury bug, I could easily see them, moving up those rankings quite a bit.
I think it's fair to start, especially with how last year transpired. The lack of a point guard on this roster really bothers me, and it's more so a reason why I think this team is a bottom 5 team in the league. I just don't see teams being successful without having a solid playmaker, and this team really doesn't have a solid playmaker unless I'm missing them. So I think it's fair. I wouldn't be necessarily surprised, as Dennis just said, if they did, sneak up a little bit higher because, Porzingis and the Knicks, that's a huge question mark. Who knows if the Bulls will play any defense? Because the one thing the Magic should do well this year is play defense, if nothing else. So maybe that does push them higher up in the rankings going forward. Comically enough, I am laughing at the fact that 10 Eastern Conference teams are in the bottom 15 of the OTG Power Rankings. So it just shows you the East versus West.
Yeah, if you look at the chart that we just posted on Twitter or on Instagram, you can see the top 15 has a lot of red, which is the West, and the bottom 15 has a lot of blue, which is the East. So, but back to the ranking, I think it's maybe a touch low, but I think the Magic are probably bottom 5, bottom 10 team. Like Kory said, the point guard concern is definitely something, lack of shooting, and I wouldn't be surprised if they traded the veterans for assets like I mentioned before. And this could be, honestly, a really good year to tank because going to the season, we kind of mentioned on a previous show, we're unsure of which teams are definitely tanking. The only team is the Hawks, so the Magic aren't doing well by January. It might make sense to get one more big young piece to kind of build that franchise moving forward. Preston, what's the talk around Orlando in terms of tanking? Do you think that's something they definitely don't want to do, or if the opportunity arises, they'll take the chance?
Well, Jeff Wellman and John Hammond have expressed vehemently many times that they're playing the long game. They're not trying to win quick. They're trying to play the long game. And we saw that they didn't seal the deal on Isaiah Thomas, who they were said to be talking to. Multiple sources in Orlando confirmed it. So they had the opportunity to go in on a point guard. They could have chased guys like Seth Curry or Shabazz Napier, just kind of some kind of stopgap at the position. Instead, they decided to deal Bismack Biyombo and 2 second-round picks for Jerian Grant, somebody who's not expected to give beyond 15 to 20 minutes per game with the Magic this year. So it doesn't appear on paper that the Magic are going to try to win this year, but then you have to take into account Steve Clifford. Steve Clifford is not going to rest veterans. If anything, I think Jonathan Isaac and Mo Bamba are going to get fewer minutes with the Magic this year than they would with almost any other coach other than like Tom Thibodeau, just because this guy likes playing his veterans. He likes smart players on the floor. He likes disciplined people who do their job. And I think that's what's going to happen in Orlando. And so he might tie the hands of Jeff Weltman and John Hammond if these guys start winning too soon, or Jeff Weltman and John Hammond might say, oh my gosh, we're 25 and 22 at the break. We need to deal some of these guys so we can get a higher pick and develop some assets and continue building these young players. Because at some point, you have to start giving more minutes to guys like Wesley Iwundu, Melvin Frazier, Ken Birch, Jarrell Martin, those guys who are part of your long-term plans. Because right now we don't anticipate that guys like Nikola Vucevic and Timothy Mozgov are in those long-term plans. But with that being said, I don't think you can rule out Steve Clifford. I think if the Magic get out to a hot start, something like 10-5, similar to the 8-4 they did last year, I think these guys are going to go for it, and they're going to chase that playoff spot. People in Orlando are tired of losing. I think it's been since 2012, the last time the Magic made the playoffs. So if there's a chance to get it this year, I think they go for it.
Well, talking about Clifford, obviously new additions, new head coach. What else do you think he's going to bring to the team? He's going to be that, stabilizing source that makes the Magic more respectable?
Yeah, definitely. Going back to what I said about Marvin Williams quotes is the problem that the Magic had with Frank Vogel, and I went to a lot of these games as a credentialed media member. Frank Vogel almost looked like completely despondent. The players just were not listening to what he was selling anymore. The players had moved on. Part of it was due to injuries. Part of it was due to distrust in the locker room. These guys don't pass the ball to each other in certain instances. There would be entire quarters where DJ Augustine and Mario Hezonja would be out on the floor where the guys would not even look at each other. And you can't attribute all of that to Frank Vogel, but you certainly have to attribute some of it to him. He is the head coach. Whether or not it's his fault or whether or not these guys just can't get along, it's his job to fix that friction in the locker room. I don't think Steve Clifford is going to put up with any of that. I think if guys, don't give the ball to each other, he's going to bench them. He's going to find somebody else who will. And at least that's the perspective we've all been led to believe by people we've talked to with the Charlotte organization, is that this guy is going to come in, he's going to inflict his will. He's going to teach these guys to play basketball again, and they're going to play sound, fundamental basketball like some of the basketball we see in Miami.
Yeah, I think the move from Clifford to Vogel, I don't know. I think that Clifford I think he has a chance to really help them in terms of, as you said, bringing some of those young guys along. But unfortunately, part of that means that, as Preston alluded to, he doesn't play guys a lot. Like Malik Monk last year in Charlotte didn't get a lot of run, and that puts a lot of pressure on the young guys. However, I think that moving forward, I think that Orlando's on the right path. And so I think as you go into this season, I think there is obviously going to be an opportunity for them to tank. But I just don't know why, as Preston alluded to as well, I don't know why you don't go for it at the beginning of the season. I think they will play more, more of a slowed down, smart brand of basketball under Steve Clifford. But as you said, I'm not sure what the Magic can really gain from tanking again, just because, they're already got a pretty young team. I mean, I know you can always use more draft picks, but they're a pretty young team, looking at their roster. They don't have a lot of guys. I think they have two guys that are 30 or above. And they don't have a lot of money committed, so they do have some room to make moves for proven guys after this year, that is. So it'll be interesting to see what they actually decide to do.
Yeah, not to mention, just piggybacking off of that, it's not like the upcoming draft class is loaded. Like, you have to be really bad this upcoming year to probably get a decent pick. I think it looks like the draft this year is like, 5 guys who look really good, and then everyone else is going to be really hit or miss. But back to Clifford, I definitely think Clifford is way more stern. Definitely. He just has that look of a no nonsense guy. And as you guys both mentioned, Malik Monk didn't even play really and went to Hornets. Obviously he fell out of favor with Steve Clifford. That's my only really real concern with this young Orlando team and Clifford is, if Clifford gets annoyed, does he give up on the young guys or does he play through it? Because in recent memory and past, he kind of goes away from the young guys and plays more guys who have, proven it and have shown it. But I definitely think defensively this team is going to be better. And like you mentioned, Preston, I think they will. They're just they're gonna play harder. I mean, because at the end of the day, if you want to play, Clifford's not gonna let you go out there and not look at your teammate for minutes at a time. It just won't fly on his court.
Yeah, they'll definitely get more of a system in place, and like you guys said, kind of a no-nonsense type of thing. But moving on to the draft picks, number 6 overall, Magic selected Mo Bamba, obviously super high potential. Some people think he can be the best player in the draft. What were your thoughts on the Magic selecting Mo Bamba?
I think we were thrilled. We weren't anticipating him to fall. We thought that we were going to have a shot at Trae Young, which pretty much everybody was talking about all season, was that point guard, that shooter, that guy who could stretch the floor. Obviously, the Magic didn't have a whole lot of shooting beyond those first 12 games last year, but we're not expecting too much. I personally am not expecting too much out of him this season. As I said, until Nikola Vucevic gets dealt at the trade market, I think he's going to be started. I honestly do believe, as shocking as this might sound, that Steve Clifford is going to give some minutes to Timothy Mozgov. I think he just really values veteran leadership. And of course, you've got Ken, that. I know. I think you've got Ken Birch out there as well. He needs some minutes at the 5. So I'm thinking Mo Bamba, they're going to bring along slowly. I don't think he's going to play any more than 22 to 24 minutes a game. In Anthony Davis' rookie season, he was just at about 27 minutes. I think that's the highest threshold you could possibly expect from Mo Bamba. And I think they're just going to let him develop his game. We already saw some of it at Summer League. Obviously, the wingspan is the draw that gets the eye. But offensively, he's got a really crisp, long distance shooting stroke. He knocked down pretty much everything he shot from the perimeter. He's a guy who doesn't force anything. He's not a turnover prone basketball. He kind of just falls within his game. Not overly aggressive on the offensive end, but certainly very efficient. He was the most efficient player for the Magic during that time. The only player who shot over 50%. And defensively, he's gonna get bullied in the paint. He still needs to add on some size. So whenever you have those big Marc Gasol types, probably not going to expect him to go head-to-head against those guys too much. But in other instances where he can get the opportunity to go after a guy like a DeAndre Ayton, as he did in Summer League, a guy who's slightly bigger, it's going to be a good test for him to match physicality with physicality. And I think that's all you can hope for as a Magic fan, is that he just kind of assimilates the game this year, grows in size, kind of develops his NBA body, and kind of takes from guys like Nikola Vucevic, Aaron Gordon, Jonathan Isaac, and begins to expand his game.
I think the pick, I remember, heading into the draft, I don't follow college basketball too much. So I had just heard about the kid from Texas that was, the crazy wingspan, and how he in the workouts, he was just putting on a shooting display. So that's the thing, is I think, obviously, if the shooting is real and it's something that he can sustain, I think it's a great pick, because having a big guy like that can block shots, protect the paint a little bit, I think if they're able to shoot and help you spread the floor, I think that's a no-brainer. However, after watching, Wendell Carter in Summer League, Kevin Knox in Summer League, I think there is a chance that this was a pick. Weltman and Hammond coming from Milwaukee, they took a chance on a guy kind of not, obviously not playing the center position, but Giannis. I mean, I think that they had a chance with this 6th pick to kind of swing for the fences with Bamba. I think his ceiling is higher than those guys, Wendell Carter and Kevin Knox. However, this first season, I think it's more about, as Preston said, him just kind of establishing a rhythm in terms of getting used to and accustomed to the NBA. And the great thing about him is that if he is a shooter that can sustain, I think that you can play him at the 4. You can play him alongside of Vucevic or even Mozgov. And with his length and his ability to cover ground on the floor, I think he'll make up for a lot of defensive mistakes that he might make. And also it just makes the Magic more versatile. So I actually really like the pick for them. And I think as well, I think you'd have to go ahead and say that Isaac would be, this could be kind of his rookie season as well, considering he only played 27 games last year. So I'm really excited to see what those two can do defensively and how they fit in.
Yeah, I was really high on Mo Bamba. Like you, Dennis, I don't watch a ton of college. I watch like March Madness, and that's about it from my collegeness. But I like Mo Bamba. Texas has a really good history of getting guys who are very long and tall. You know, Miles Turner, Jared Allen, Mo Bamba. They seem to find centers that at least look to translate well in the NBA. I think Mo Bamba is going to be a stud. How long it takes for him to get there is a different story, but I love the length. I love just thinking about a lineup that has Aaron Gordon, Isaac, and Mo Bamba. I think that's a really, I mean, Aaron Gordon needs to raise his defensive ability, but I think Mo Bamba will get there. Shooting wise, obviously, for a guy his height to have that kind of shooting stroke is dangerous and lethal. Mo Bamba to me was probably my second favorite pick behind Luka Doncic.
Yeah, I'm definitely on the Mo Bamba hype train. If I was a Magic fan, I'd be super excited about the pick just because of the potential. But what do you guys think? And Preston, before you get out of here, I know you got to hop on the radio. What's the best case scenario for Mo Bamba?
Oh man, this year I wasn't expecting too much of him. As long as he stays healthy, I guess that's the most you can hope for. And if you can get some glimpses of his potential on the biggest stage, that would also be a big indicator. If he shows early on that Steve Clifford has faith in him, if he starts playing him 25 minutes per game, I think that's an early indicator. He seems like a super smart kid. He seems like he's super willing to pick up everything the coaches are giving him. He was the first guy off the bench in summer league, getting into his guys. He was coaching up Jonathan Isaac. Jonathan Isaac was drawing bad fouls defensively, where he was just getting his hands wrapped up with guys like Jaren Jackson, like DeAndre Ayton. And Mo Bamba would actually come over to him and he would coach him and he'd be like, hey, man, hands up, hands up. You can't keep your hands low. So it seems like he's already got a mind for a game. Now, can he convince Steve Clifford that he's ready to play meaningful minutes right now? I think that would be a really promising indicator. But honestly, as long as he stays healthy, I think the sky's the limit for him. Athletically, there's nobody with obviously the size. He can jump to the top of the backboard. So I just think we can be cautious this year. Just pray for steady growth and pray that he gets a lot of time on the court.
Yeah, I would say ceiling wise, I think Bamba, I don't think he's ever going to be a 20-point per game scorer. However, I think he could be a out of this world defender. I think he can be an elite defensive player that can just change the outcome of a game. But in terms of offensive talent, I think I would say his ceiling would be that he's actually a knockdown shooter for them. And as those things open up, maybe they can get, as we mentioned, some of their point guard issues. Maybe they can secure that point guard of the future, and he could be a deadly pick and pop or pick and roll player, just with his length and his ability to finish around the rim. So I think, as Preston said, I think Bamba could be an all-star. I think he could be a guy that could be a foundational piece for your franchise. But I don't really see the I don't foresee him being a crazy scorer, if you will. So yeah, I think Bamba's a great. It's a great risk to take if you're the Magic.
Yeah, I definitely see all-star as a ceiling, and then I don't know. I feel like he could be a more athletic version of Serge Ibaka to a degree. Not a first or second option on an offense, maybe like a third or fourth, can play really good defense and can rebound. And I think, like you mentioned too, Dennis, in the pick and roll and the pick and pop, I think that's where Mo Bamba will probably flourish offensively.
Yeah, definitely going to be something to keep an eye on. Obviously, the potential, and like Preston said, staying healthy this season is going to be big and adding that weight on. But Preston, big thanks for you hopping on. And you can check out more Magic talk from Preston on Do You Believe in Magic, part of the OTG Podcast Network.
Appreciate it, guys. Cheers.
Later, Preston. Thanks for hopping on.
Moving on, guys, to the other draft picks. The Magic also selected Melvin Frazier, and they also had a draft day trade for Justin Jackson. Any thoughts on these two?
Based on what I was able to just find, I did a little bit of research. I'm all prepared. Both of them, it just seems like those people who follow the Magic and people that follow the league in general, I think they just said these two picks were Weltman Hammond specials. They're both crazy long Like both of them over 7 feet wingspans, even though I think they're both 6'6", 6'7" in that range. So the Magic are just assembling a group of guys with super long arms that can, defend positions. So it's almost like they're doing another version of what they did in Milwaukee in terms of just getting just a group of guys that are athletic, that are long, that can really do some damage defensively. Neither Frazier or Jackson are much in the way of knockdown shooters. I think Frazier had some moments in Summer League. He looked good. He was more of a scorer. However, I know Justin Jackson was not much of a scorer during his time in Maryland, and he's coming off a shoulder injury from last season. So both of them, they could turn into rotational guys, but as we've mentioned, Clifford is not too big on playing rookies, especially ones that might be prone to defensive lapses.
Yeah, I mean, Melvin Frazier was the first, he went to Tulane, right? Tulane,
yeah, Tulane.
The first Tulane guy ever to be drafted in the NBA. So congrats to that.
That's cool.
Yeah, 6'5". The Celtics had interest in him, whatever that means. He's gotten better every year in college. He went from averaging 5.2 to 11.5 to 15.9. The shooting numbers have gotten better. He went to shooting under 30% from three his first 2 years to shooting 38% his junior year. So you like to see that. Maybe he can, like Dennis mentioned, though, a lot of these guys, like I don't know how much run they get playing for Steve Clifford. Maybe someone gets hurt, someone gets banged up for, a couple weeks, and one of these guys gets called up on a two-way deal or whatever, and they get a chance to ball out and they earn some sort of rotational spot. But I have a feeling that we're not going to see a lot of these two guys this year.
Yeah, second round picks, no guarantee of getting minutes. They could spend time in the G League. And like you guys mentioned, Clifford's not known for playing rookies. Looking at some of the other acquisitions they had, they were busy in the trade front in a sense. They made a trade that included the Chicago Bulls and the Charlotte Hornets. They picked up Jerian Grant and Timothy Mozgov. What do you think about bringing these two on board?
I think just getting out of Biyombo's deal, I think that's great for them. I think getting Mozgov and Grant back, I don't think that's as important. I think they were just maybe ready to get away from Biyombo. I like Mozgov. I think Mozgov's a solid center, and unfortunately, the market for him, think about it. 3 years ago, 4 years ago, he was huge for Cleveland in the finals, and now he is excuse me, and now he's someone who we're not even sure if he should be in the league. So I think there's potential for him there, and I think they felt that obviously Mozgov is a better player than Biyombo. And I like the addition of Grant. I don't think he moves the needle too much for you, but it's worth a shot. And they also picked up Jarrell Martin, which I didn't know if you were going to get to that one or not. But anyway, so I like the guys they've brought in. I don't think they were, I don't think they're guys that are going to be a huge part of the rotation. I think Mozgov and Grant are going to be bench guys that maybe give 10 to 15 minutes a game. But I think Preston alluded to it as well. I think Mozgov could see more minutes as the season goes, because I think he's that type of player that, I think Steve Clifford will know how to get the best out of him. And Jerian Grant gives them a little bit of depth at the point guard position. While he's not lighting the world on fire, he's a solid point guard.
Yeah, I think Jerian Grant, yesterday on Full Access Hoops, I had Stephen Cameron on. He's also a Magic guy, and he was saying how Jerian Grant's probably going to have his, aside from his time with the Knicks, his best chance of starting and winning a starting job. DJ Augustine I think DJ Augustine's over 30 now, or he's got to be 29. And even DJ Augustine, he's not a starting point guard in the NBA. He's a backup. So you pretty much have two backup point guards playing the point guard position. And who knows, Jerian Grant is younger. If he also, I think he's a slightly better defender. So I wouldn't be surprised if Jerry Grant ends up starting at some point this year. That point guard position to me is just such an issue. And then the Biyombo for Mozgov. I mean, I don't think Mozgov plays much. I think it was kind of like a favor to Biyombo, trading Biyombo. I mean, Biyombo can still play. I think Biyombo, I mean, at 17 million, I'd rather have Biyombo than what's Mozgov making?
16 points.
But Mozgov's on a shorter deal, right?
No, they actually both of them end at the same time. Mozgov's making 16 million this year and 16.7 next season.
All right, so it's relatively the same contract. So I don't know. I think Biyombo would have been more serviceable than Mozgov personally. So for me, I feel like it was just kind of like a favor to Biyombo. You're right though. If Mozgov has any use, Steve Clifford will find it defensively at least. But I mean, he was out of the rotation in Brooklyn within what, Nick? A month, 2 months?
Yeah, honestly, I'll tell you straight up. I mean, I would be immensely surprised if Mozgov has anything left in the tank. He was the worst player in Brooklyn last year. My man couldn't make a layup. He's 7 feet tall, didn't really have much energy, super slow. Mozgov, I wouldn't like, and then he started complaining this offseason. It's one of the reasons the Nets moved him to Charlotte when then they moved to Orlando, was the fact that he was complaining that he wasn't getting minutes. But if you watched him play last year, which I saw pretty much every single minute he played, he was terrible, and I don't really think he has a spot in the league anymore. He could come back this offseason, honestly, and I also think the knee injury he suffered in Cleveland, after that, he was never the same. Even in LA, he never got back to that level, and I think that had an impact on him because he is really slow, and he just can't do a ton on the floor. Like, offensively, he's not providing you much other than setting good screens. Offensive rebounding, he should be kind of dominating the boards a little bit more. He doesn't do that. So I'm not a big fan of Mozgov. Maybe they wanted to save like a mill or two, or it just helped them get Grant, which I thought was a good move, getting Grant, because he's a young point guard. Obviously, Kory mentioned it. Point guard position is an issue. Now you take a flyer on a young guy. Maybe it works out. You know, best case scenario, you have a backup point guard of the future. I don't think Grant will ever be a starter. Jarrell Martin, honestly, is a little bit interesting to me. Rough start to his career. I believe he dealt with an injury his rookie season with Memphis, and then last year he was okay. Shot around like 34% from three. So if he could develop a three-point shot, the Magic could use spacing a lot. So I think that'd be interesting. But the trade-wise, I don't think any guys, big time. Grant has the highest potential, I think, to be maybe long-term backup point guard. But moving on to free agent signings, nothing too crazy. Isaiah Briscoe, who was playing international basketball, and then Amal Jefferson, who is on a two-way deal or a training camp deal, I believe. Any thoughts on these two?
Briscoe, he can get to the basket, but he's not a great shooter. He's a hard-nosed defender, but unfortunately, I think the Magic need more shooting, and he's not going to provide that.
Yeah, I think he's just a flyer. A guy kind of close to us. He's from Newark, New Jersey. I don't know. I think Isaiah Briscoe could get some minutes, if DJ Augustine kind of falls apart or if Jerry Grant falls apart. But realistically, I mean, I don't see this guy playing much at all.
Two flyers and two younger guys. See what works out. It kind of makes sense for Orlando. Re-signing wise, they kept their man Aaron Gordon. Thoughts on bringing Gordon back, and what do you expect from him this year?
I think no-brainer that they brought him back. I think there was seemed like there was some concern from some people that Gordon might, depart. However, they signed him up pretty quickly. I think they have to be ecstatic about the number they got him at. I think it's 4 years, $84 million, which that's not a bad deal, especially given what Gordon could be. I mean, he's only 22 years old. I think he showed some flashes last season. Unfortunately, it just seems like I don't know. I mean, watching Gordon play, it just feels like he should be playing the four. He should be one of your bigs. And I don't think the Magic have kind of found that rhythm with him as of now. And to me, it seems like Gordon could be that four guy. And if he's able to, get a consistent jump shot, I think his ceiling goes from, just a uber athletic guy that, isn't going to be able to carry your team on a nightly basis. I think a consistent jump shot pushes him up to an all NBA talent. Granted, that's, saying that versus him actually making that happen, that's a big leap. But I love the move in re-signing Gordon. I think you got to keep him, even if he maybe hasn't lived up to what you see for him as of yet. I think you have to re-sign, and I think getting him at that number is great, considering that Clint Capella got less. I think Jabari Parker got less. I mean, all these guys that you can comp with Aaron Gordon got less. So I think Aaron Gordon's got to feel pretty good about the deal that he signed, and I think the Magic have to feel good about keeping him.
Yeah, they had to sign Aaron Gordon. They had to keep Aaron Gordon for what I mentioned earlier. With how Victor Oladipo and Tobias Harris have turned out, you can't afford to let another young guy walk and for him to become the third star to pop. Even though I think Aaron Gordon is the worst out of those three, the ceiling is still extremely high. I mentioned to Nick before, I think he could be like a slightly better Blake Griffin, but without the playmaking ability. He's shown glimpses of having a 3-point shot. He is a high flyer. Despite, the list of nagging injuries he had that Preston named earlier, it's a little concerning, but nothing serious. I think if you went to any player in the NBA, and said, what kind of injuries did you deal with last year? Everyone would have, a handful of nagging injuries they had, whether it's a twisted, ankle or whatever the case may be. But they had to re-sign him. I think Aaron Gordon is set to, possibly be on the verge of being an all-star this year in the East. You can definitely make the case that he could possibly be a reserve if he can elevate his game. But 4 years, $76 million, not a bad deal. He's only making $6 million more overall on the contract than Evan Fournier just signed, because I think he signed like a 4-year, $70 million deal, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not bad. I'm completely okay with this signing from the Magic standpoint.
And I think the nicest thing about the Gordon contract is it's front loaded, 21.5 in the first year. And then by the time it's the last year, it's 16.4. So the Magic are obviously going to get better and they're going to try to attract free agents. So I think that's something to keep an eye on as well. But like you guys said, pretty much spot on. I think I really agree with Kory's point. The fact that you saw Oladipo and Tobias Harris leave and have a lot of success, you couldn't allow this young star to leave without at least getting something back. And then I think, like Dennis said as well, if he adds a jumper, that's going to be the game changer for him. A consistent jumper with his athletic ability and his physical tools, he'll be a big-time player. And I think the All-Star appearance this year as a reserve is a real possibility, especially with the East getting weaker, obviously. But talking departures, Bismack Biyombo, they lost in the trade. Free agent losses, Mario Hezonja, Shelvin Mack, Aaron Aflalo, Mo Spates, James Artis, and Rodney Purvis. What are your thoughts on these guys losing them? Anybody really stick out to you as a loss?
Not really. I think Hezonja is a guy that I know some people are talking themselves into could be a breakout guy for the Knicks. However, based on what he did for the Magic, I don't think the Magic can feel bad about letting him walk. He struggled mightily there. I think in terms of Biyombo, I don't think they're going to miss any of those guys. Based on the fact that this was one of the worst teams in the league last season. So bringing back the same team, I don't know how excited your fan base would be for that. So I think letting some of those guys go is fine. Obviously Hezonja, if he breaks out this season, it could sting a little for the Magic, but I don't think they wanted to keep him around.
Yeah, I think Hezonja is the only guy you could say maybe is a loss. He compared himself to the European version of Kobe, I believe.
Yeah, a Croatian version or Croatian Kobe.
Right. Yeah. So I think, if he, finally gets some minutes with the Knicks, which he likely will, and maybe he explodes and maybe he's more of a loss. But again, all of these guys none of them moved the needle much, and none of them likely are going to be big parts of a winning team, at least not this winning team with the guys you have around. So Hezonja is probably the only guy you slightly miss. But that's also only if he develops. If Hezonja, becomes nothing more than a role player, a 15 to 25 minute per night guy, on a bad Knicks team, then it's not a loss at all.
And I think the relationship with Hazonia wasn't very good. Obviously, they had the chance to give him a qualifying offer, keep him as a restricted free agent, and midseason they decided not to. So I think obviously he wanted to be out, and I think the Magic just didn't have a ton of interest in him. And then with Steve Clifford being there, Hazonia obviously isn't known for his defense. A lot of the other guys, they took flyers on, or they're veterans that really didn't fit with the team. Like Kory mentioned, Bismack probably over Mozgov in my opinion, but you wouldn't have been able to get Grant, so that's fine. So nothing really big free agent loss-wise. Obviously, they didn't add a ton other than the draft picks, but we'll see what happens. Getting into the prediction portion of the show, next year's starting five for Orlando.
I think you go Vucevic, Gordon at the 5 and the 4. I think Jonathan Simmons at the 3, Fournier at the 2, DJ Augustine at the 1. I think they had some success with that lineup, and that's my prediction. If I was the head coach, which I'm not, but if I was the head coach, I would throw Isaac in there instead of Simmons, or I might go bigger, move Fournier down to the 1, Simmons down to the 2, Isaac at the 3, Gordon at the 4, and I might even start Bamba at the 5. I don't think that you as a team, I don't know if the Magic, have playoff aspirations or what their feelings are about their team. But for me, I think it's important to give the young guys minutes. And, Vucevic, he's a solid player, always has been. But I think if you have the chance to develop Bamba and let him get started in that development, I think that's what you got to do. But for me, I think, again, Vucevic, Gordon, Simmons, Fournier, and Augustine.
Yeah, I think that's probably what they start with. Personally, I would like to see them start the year off with Vucevic. Hey,
there you go, Kory. That was spot on.
Yeah, right. I'm not gonna lie. So digress. Dennis, every time you said Vucevic, I was sitting here just repeating it. So
that's the teacher skills coming in, Dennis.
Oh, buddy.
Yeah. So then at the 4, Aaron Gordon. At the 3, I would start Jonathan Isaac at the 3, and at the 2 have Evan Fournier, and then have DJ Augustine start, and I would have Jonathan Simmons come off the bench. I'm a big Simmons fan, though. It's unfortunate that he's on the Magic because I feel like he could help out so many teams, but that's a different podcast.
And he developed some playmaking skills last year. When the Magic were injured at the point guard position, they made Simmons play a little playmaking role, and he really, added to his game. So, but I think you guys are pretty spot on in terms of the starting lineup, what it'll actually be. I personally kind of would go what you were saying, Dennis, maybe play some of the younger guys, get Mo Bamba in there, or at least Isaac. The only question is, can you really play Gordon, Isaac, and Bamba? It depends on the three-point shooting from those three. So yeah. I think that would be the concern. But other than that, you have nothing to lose. Even if the Magic were to make the playoffs, like what's best case scenario? They get swept in the first round. So I think the major concern for them this season should be player development. It'll be interesting how the front office and Steve Clifford kind of decide on that. Because if I'm looking at this team, I want to develop those guys and see what I have, especially going to the next draft. What would you say is a position battle this year? Is there any position battles in the starting lineup or the rotation that you see, or it'll just kind of be something we'll have to keep an eye on?
I'd say just the 5 spot. I think Vucevic, Mozgov, and Bamba. I think that there's really, say what you will about Mozgov. I know his best days are probably behind him. However, defensively, he's an upgrade over Vucevic. Obviously, Vucevic is going to score points for you. He's going to be, a foundational piece for your offense. He's a guy that can get buckets, but he's not a great defender. And I think as well, those two going at it, I think you have Bamba, Bamba on the side there. He's not ready in terms of physically. He's not ready. He's got a lot of work to do. However, as I mentioned, if he's a shooter, I mean, if his shooting is for real, I think the Magic have to take a strong look at him just because they don't have a lot of shooting anywhere else on their roster. I think Jonathan Isaac showed flashes of a jump shot. Fournier and Augustine are obviously, decent knockdown shooters. Gordon is hit or miss, but I think if Bamba if he displays and shows himself as a shooter, I think he could easily get into that positional battle and possibly even take some big minutes from the rotation, because I think Clifford just would have no choice but to play him.
I think there's a positional battle at the point guard position only because of the lack of talent. And then at the small forward position, I wouldn't be surprised if Jonathan Isaac and Jonathan Simmons are going at it.
And Terrence Ross.
And I forget about Terrence Ross as well. Yeah,
He always feels like the forgotten guy, if it's Toronto or Orlando.
Yeah, I mean, Terrence Ross is solid. I don't think I would ever consider him starting over those two guys. But, I mean, crazier things have happened. He was a starter at one point in his career.
He started games for Orlando last year, too.
Yeah. And then, like Dennis mentioned, the center position is probably the most intriguing with Mo Bamba and Vujicic. I was doing well. But I don't know. I think I'm most intrigued for the small forward only because I have such growing aspirations for how good Jonathan Isaac could be if he develops a consistent jumper. Because I love his length, and he looks a little bit bigger this year than he was last year. He's still kind of a lanky guy, but length, being lanky means very little when you look at guys like Kevin Durant and watch how they dominate. So I think the small forward is the positional battle I'm most interested in, because I think if Jonathan Isaac takes that over, or like you mentioned too, maybe if Jonathan Simmons plays the 2 and Fournier plays some of the 1, and Isaac can play the 3. But I'm going to be interested in that battle.
Do you guys think that Aaron Gordon, Isaac, and Bamba can all play together? Do you think that's, going to work in this NBA with a ton of teams going small?
Totally. I mean, as you see, the funny thing is if you bring up Giannis and you ask people, is he a good defender? The easy answer is yes, he is. In terms of position, though, when you watch him play, he makes a lot of mistakes defensively. However, his length and athleticism, it erases those mistakes. All 3 of those guys are, they're crazy athletes. And in the case of Isaac and Bamba, they're long. In the case of Bamba, they are freakishly long. And I think that defensively, that would be a group that could switch, that could put some pressure on perimeter players, that can get hands up. And also, shot blockers. All 3 of those guys can block shots. Offensively, again, if Bamba can shoot, that gives you the ability for him to be more out on the perimeter. I think, as I said, Isaac, there's a lot to be seen if Isaac and Gordon can be consistent shooters.
I mean, I like it from the length standpoint, because I love what Milwaukee is trying to do, with how Milwaukee has a ton of, guys who are long, who can defend. Because right now, the NBA is all about, can you switch? Can you guard? Right. Can you guard multiple positions? Can you play multiple positions? And although I think Aaron Gordon is kind of limited to a really small 5 and a 4, I don't like him as a 3. I think Isaac can play, arguably 2 through 4 probably. Mo Bamba 4 and 5. The shooting is just the biggest concern I have with them. But if Isaac can raise his shooting, if Aaron Gordon can just he doesn't have to shoot over 50% like he did that one stretch earlier last season. But if he can shoot, 36, 37% from 3, I'll be okay with that as long as he has guys around him. I mean, I think this is actually one of the more intriguing 3, members of a young core. Obviously, we haven't got to see much Isaac, and we haven't got to see pretty much any of Mo Bamba yet. But I do think this could be a potential playoff team in the East going forward when these guys hit near their ceiling, because I do think Gordon is going to develop a steady jump shot, and I think Isaac will too. So I'm gonna say I like it because I like the length.
Yeah, I don't think I'm as confident as you guys. I think probably Aaron Gordon and Isaac's best position might be at the 4. I think Isaac is such a wild card. It's hard to say. I believe he played like 2% of his minutes last year at the small forward position. Obviously, only played under 30 games. But I would say, both guys probably are best off at the 4. Defensively, I could see it working, but it's yet to be known if Aaron Gordon can really defend threes at a high level. Same thing about Isaac. And then offensively, it would work if Bamba is a consistent three-point shooter, and the same with the other guys kind of improve a little. I think I'm a little bit more skeptical on it. I'm kind of waiting to see what will happen with Isaac. I remember him coming out of the draft. You saw all type of predictions for him being just a defensive specialist, all the way to guys saying he could have a similar game to being a KD light. So I think Isaac is just such a wild card in this situation. Talking about wild cards, though, breakout starter next year for the Magic.
Oh, well, I think you have to hope, if you're the Magic, that you either get Aaron Gordon improving upon what he did. But for me, I think the breakout guy will be Isaac. I think Isaac's got a lot to his game to be excited about. I think he's got a lot of upside. And if he's able to stay healthy, I think there's a lot that he can do for them over the course of the season. So for me, I'd go with Jonathan Isaac.
Aaron Gordon's my breakout starter. I think he showed signs of it coming last year, especially in that early stretch. And as Preston mentioned, all those nagging injuries, if he can stay relatively healthy, be the high flyer we know him to be, and then add a jump shot, I think he's the guy that is going to break out. And I think a dark horse all-star candidate next year would be Aaron Gordon from the Magic.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Gordon, remember early in the season, everyone was like, oh, he's a lock for most improved player. He didn't even end up finishing top 3, a lot due to the injuries and a lot due to the Orlando Magic not having much success. So I think this year, if he can stay healthy and he can add that 3-point shot, I think one promising thing is how much he improved last season. So another offseason improving even more. It'll be interesting to see what type of step he can make. What about breakout bench player? What player is going to break out off the bench, really showcase some skills?
Off the bench, I would say Bamba, just because I hope Steve Clifford gives him some minutes. I think it has a chance to be a really unique player. It's not often that you look at a long shot blocking big as a guy that could potentially shoot the ball. So I think that's the part that's exciting with Bamba, is that he's got a chance to do something that the Magic need.
I want to make a crazy pick for breakout bench player. I'm saying Jerry Grant.
Like it. And
I'm saying it because, we just talked about our breakout starter, right? And I said Aaron Gordon. And then after I said that, and Nick was talking about how he also was choosing Aaron Gordon, I was thinking, the lack of a point guard changes my entire take on that, though. Because if Aaron Gordon doesn't have a guy who can create and help him, then I don't know how much his ceiling raises, which brings me to Jerry Grant. Now, although Jerry Grant will be coming off the bench primarily, I wouldn't be surprised if he wins a starting battle, as I think I've mentioned earlier. He does play solid defense. He's kind of streaky. If he develops just the ability to play make for others and hit a knockdown 3, I think Jerry Grant could be a crucial part for any success this Magic team has. I'm a big guy. I'm high on point guards. I think you need to have a point guard win in the NBA, which I think a lot of people would agree with.
You almost need 2 or 3.
Right. Right. The Warriors have like 3 guys who can play make. So for me, it's going to be Jerry Grant, because I think this team is in dire need of a guy who can play make, and maybe Jerry Grant can be that guy.
Yeah, I could see Grant having a nice season. And to back up the Gordon point, that I'm not as scared about him not having the playmaker, I think Steve Clifford's system will kind of help Gordon get some easier shots where he doesn't have to create as much for himself. But for me, breakout bench player is going to be Isaac. He showed a lot in Summer League. I know a lot of people are talking about him being jacked. And obviously, this is almost like his rookie season. So coming into here, I think Isaac's going to really impress. I don't know to what extent, but I think he'll take his game to the next level this year. Obviously, there's not much to improve on after a small season. But prediction-wise, in the win column, best case scenario for the Magic, or it could be in the 10 column, whatever you want to go with. Best case scenario for the season.
Best case scenario, I think, is 35 to 40 wins. I think that's their best case scenario if everything breaks right and Aaron Gordon turns into a super duper, stud. I think that's their best case scenario.
I think best case. I don't know record wise because the 8 seed could be a losing record, but I think best case scenario would be an 8 seed. They somehow sneak into the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm not as high as you guys. I think best case scenario would be like 34 wins. I think there's a good chance they'll trade one of the vets, and I just don't see that. I see the point guard position being a real issue, and then the lack of consistent spacing being an issue. I know the East isn't great, but Orlando also wasn't very good last year, and they didn't make a ton of changes. And like we all kind of assume, Mo Bamba's not going to have a ginormous season this year. It's more raw potential for moving forward. But worst case scenario for the Magic.
Worst case, I would say they're going to have a similar record to what they had last season. I think 20 to 30 wins. That's their worst case scenario. I just think that given how bad the East might be and how good the West is, you got a lot of tough games against teams in the West. And then I think, that's their worst case scenario would be in the same range they were last season.
For me, I think worst case scenario is this team finishes with 23 wins, 24 wins, slightly worse than they were last year at 25. And we see, Aaron Gordon remain the same, kind of plateau. Jonathan Isaac doesn't raise the bar at all. I think Mo Bamba I'll give him more than 1 year to kind of let me down if he does let me down, which I don't think he will. But I think that would be the worst case scenario is the team doesn't add any wins, and then Aaron Gordon doesn't raise his game.
Yeah, I think actually I had 24 wins written down as well. I think that would be worst case scenario, which in some ways wouldn't be the worst case scenario because I don't think tanking is a terrible idea for this team. I don't think trading the vets and playing all the young guys and letting them develop and see what you have and then getting another high pick. Like Kory said, the draft isn't super deep next year, but if you can get yourself a top 5 pick, you add to this young core, you maybe add a wing or a point guard. Now you're in good position. You have a full young core moving forward, and you can really have high expectations and attract free agents. So I think the worst case is almost the best case in a way because tanking, I think, would work out for the Magic because I just don't see a ton of positive in playing the veterans a lot and not playing all these young pieces you have, especially young pieces that you don't necessarily know a ton about. It's kind of a lot of raw guys where you want to see what type of level they can hit. But actual prediction for the Magic next year, where are they going to end win total wise? Is it going to be a bad season, good season, in between what?
I just don't. I think they're gonna have they're not. I don't think they're going to be close to a playoff spot. I think for me, I look at them getting 33 wins. I think that's a good total for them. I don't think that they'll necessarily tank. I think they're, that's the issue is I think we get really excited about tanking, and I think we want all teams to do it. However, if you tank and tank and tank, you just constantly are getting these young guys that don't know how to win, and they come in and they don't develop. I think Steve Clifford is a guy that can accelerate that development for some of them. I think he's a coach that can help some of these second and third year guys really find their niche in the NBA. So having said that, though, I still don't see them even getting close to a playoff spot.
Actual prediction, I'm gonna say 25 wins. I don't think this team got any worse. I don't think they necessarily got any better though. I'm like I said, and I've said this numerous times on this podcast, the lack of point guard to me is extremely concerning. I just, especially with guys like the rookies, for example, like Mo Bamba. He doesn't have a true point guard to help get him going in situations. I just think that's going to be an issue. I know, you guys have mentioned, Steve Clifford. He probably will have a system where ball movement is happening. But I don't know. I don't think this team is going to be good enough to be a playoff team. I don't think they're going to be bad enough to be, a top 5 draft pick team. I think they may be, a upper lottery team, somewhere between the 8 and 12 range.
I'm going with 26 wins. I think that they'll end up trading a veteran or two at the deadline. Maybe even if it's like a Jonathan Simmons or someone, just getting an asset moving forward and kind of adding to this, treasure chest of assets that they're trying to build up a little bit. And I think just overall, the front office, like Preston kind of alluded to earlier, they know it's a long game. They know that there's not a ton of value, and maybe Steve Clifford's playing the veterans too much, so the front office has to go ahead and move them. And like we've said, the rookies coming in, or even Isaac, they're all pretty raw, so I'm not expecting huge things. Maybe a little bit better. I wouldn't be surprised if they're a little bit worse. But moving on to the truth, and obviously, like we talked about in previous shows, this is an emoji that represents the Orlando Magic. What emoji represents the Magic for you guys?
I am not big into emojis. I don't really know, but
Unacceptable, Dennis. Unacceptable.
Yeah, unacceptable. Maybe the emoji of magician. I don't know. I got nothing.
Simple but classic.
So my emoji is, I think someone used this on a previous one, is the guy shrugging.
I feel like someone did use it. I can't recall who though, but I think it's shrugging shoulders.
We're on the third podcast. The third preview episode. We already don't know who used what emoji. It was definitely a guess though. But for me, it's the shrug because, and I'm just gonna say it one more time. Without a point guard, I don't see the point of really any of this because I think it's gonna hurt the development of guys. So until certain things are squared up, I'm just kind of like, whatever.
Yeah, no, that's a pretty fair one. I think I can't confirm this, but I believe there is a giraffe emoji. So I'm going to do a giraffe times a spider because the Magic are all about length and all these long guys with Isaac and Bamba. They are all about the wingspan, even Melvin Frazier coming in, another guy with a long wingspan. So I think that is kind of fitting for what they're looking for. But league pass wise, where would you rank this team 1 through 10?
I'd say a 4. I think just because they have some intriguing guys. Gordon, Gordon's a pretty awesome in-game dunker, so I think that could be that could entice you to possibly tune into a game. So I'd give him a 4.
I think so far I've given out a 1.5 and a 1.6.
I think it was a 1.7.
Ooh, you're right. I think I jumped a little bit high there. I'm giving them a 2. I have some interest in Mo Bamba and Jonathan Isaac. Aside from that, Aaron Gordon really doesn't interest me as a player personally. I'm
just kidding.
I don't know. I think his ceiling is decently high. I'm just not overly thrilled with his game. He doesn't. He's kind of boring for me to watch unless he's dunking. So I'm going to say a 2.
Yeah, this is going to be my lowest ranking. I think there'll probably be a 3. I think like what Kory's kind of alluded to a lot in the show is the lack of point guard. And I think at times that can be really irritating to watch. And I think best bet for them is to be like a good defensive team. And that's what Steve Clifford's going to try to do. So it's going to be a lot of like grinded out type of games. So I'm going to give them a 3. The other two teams, I believe I gave a 3.5. But what TV show would you watch over the Orlando Magic? This is obviously a hypothetical because we'll all watch basketball over everything. But in some situation, what TV show would you watch over Orlando?
What TV show? Ooh. I would say any reality show. I'd rather watch the Orlando Magic. But, if you got The Office going or How I Met Your Mother, I'm totally going to watch the rerun and then maybe catch the highlights of the Magic game later.
For me, I'm going to say South Park.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I used to watch South Park a lot when I was growing up. I feel like that was like when you hit your like 16, 17-year-old, you're like, oh, wow, this show is everything. Like, this is the greatest show. And I don't watch it as much now. It's kind of one of those things where like if I'm flipping through the channel and nothing's on, like I'll stop and watch an episode because you don't need to watch any of those in order, similar to The Office. So I'm going to say South Park because I'd rather have some comedic relief than watching a team without a point guard.
I'm going to go with Law & Order SVU. I used to like this show a lot, but it's really fallen off the last couple of years. So that I think they would get the nod over the Magic for now, but the Magic could kind of overtake them later.
Especially a rerun with Stabler. Forget it.
Yeah, and a rerun is probably better than the new stuff, to be honest. But that wraps it up for Orlando. Any other takes you guys want to get in before we get out of here?
No, I think the Magic. I think they're moving in the right direction. I like that they are, targeting certain guys. I don't know how I feel about Weltman and Hammond possibly, doing Milwaukee South. because I don't know if they have that Giannis type player that can make up for some of those mistakes. But I like the direction they're taking as a franchise.
Yeah, I mean, from having all of their free agent targets on a whiteboard 2 years ago, they did a very nice job this year of keeping their targets on the low. So I think it's definitely a step forward, and I do like the Bucks of the South. I think I'm gonna have to steal that.
Yeah, I think they're definitely moving in the right direction. Like Dennis said, it'll be intriguing what happens. If they add a guard and some wings to this roster, they'll have a nice young core in place, because I think they'll definitely hit on either Isaac or Bamba. Maybe they won't hit on both, but having one of those guys kind of become an all-star, I think, is a real possibility. So if they can add, even if they add a guard or wing, trading off one of the veterans or in a bigger deal, and it doesn't have to be, a top-tier type all-star guy, but somebody who can maybe turn into a starter down the road, I think that'd be a really nice move for the Magic this season. But that wraps. Oh, go ahead.
So I just want to say, like, on the Full Access Hoops yesterday, or the other, whenever this comes out, one of the episodes of Full Access Hoops, episode 39, I was talking about how, like, I think if Isaiah Thomas ended up in Orlando, it would have been perfect for him and the team, because realistically, there's not a lot of expectations. He could just ball out, but he would be the kind of guy who can facilitate for others. So I think that was obviously they couldn't come to terms, but he signed the mid-level exception, I believe. And
no, he signed veteran minimum.
Veteran minimum, even worse. I think I would have liked to see Isaiah Thomas in Orlando, and I think I said that before on the outlet.
What that tells me is that they're more intrigued in tanking. Like, that's what that message sends to me, because obviously they had the money to offer more to Isaiah Thomas if they wanted to, and they didn't. And they probably just were like, we rather lose games and trade some of these veterans. That's why I have a belief that they might go into tanking later in the year and try to get one of those draft picks. Like I said, there's not going to be a ton of teams that are going to the season trying to tank, so they could capitalize on it, and there's not a ton of value in making the playoffs for Orlando. They still need to develop a culture. Making the playoffs 1 year in a terrible East, I don't think is going to do that. But that wraps it up for today. As always, Dennis, Kory, thank you for hopping on. Shout out to Preston, who was on earlier today. You can check out all the previews and all the shows on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, Google Play, and Dash Radio.
Peace out, knuckleheads. Dennis, thanks for hopping on.
Yeah, see you guys.